Hey, everybody, welcome to the Truth Lab. This is our third episode of our podcast. Producer Rob's in the background, and today our guest is Jeran of Jeranism. How you doing, Jeran?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, we appreciate your time and thanks for being here and thanks for being a such a passionate truth seeker. So,
Thank you. I
uh,
appreciate that. It's not always the most fun, but I think for the most part, it's a good time.
yeah.
So
So, where to begin? Do you want to start off with kind of how your truth seeking journey started, or
sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting story. I did start out as a store manager for a drugstore. If people have ever heard of Long's Drugs, it eventually got purchased by CVS. So I was the store manager with Long's, and then we got taken over by CVS, and of course they came in and said nothing will change and it will all be the same. And then over the course of the next year or two, they completely switched the way we did everything into a very corporate way, and they stopped caring about employees and they stopped caring about customers, and it was all about the bottom line. And I just got real frustrated because I was really a big fan of Longs and the way they ran things. And then CVS was just this cookie cutter. Every store was identical. They basically needed monkeys to run it, not thinking people. So I talked to my wife and basically said, I want to quit. And it was kind of scary. We just got married in 2011 and it was 2012. And here I am now wanting to quit my $100,000 a year job. But we had two collections of books and we thought we could bring them together. And we were like, well, we'll start a bookstore and we'll sell books and we'll do things the right way. We'll be the golden rule sellers. And, that was kind of our plan. And we did. We spent a lot of time setting up the online business. And then we realized the problem with that is that how do you get customers, right? So we had this beautiful store, everything stocked, everything inventoried, but we had no customers. So what that brought us was a lot of time kind of sitting at home with nothing to do. Everything was basically inventoried and we were just waiting for customers. So we had a lot of time to research. And I'd say about 2012, 2013, we started to research into religion, I guess mostly. She was from a Bible believing Christian family. I was from a Catholic family. And we were just talking about what we would raise our child. And we kind of both came to a loggerhead where we both had problems with each other's religions, technically. And we had just never really thought about it until that time period.
wow.
So we kind of said, let's figure it out. Let's, because basically she was saying, well, the Bible's, word for word, God's word. And I was saying, no, I don't think so. I think it's, written by men, and, the church fathers have approved what goes in there. So anyway, we had this kind of impasse. And then we laid down and prayed to God that we could have a year off from, to be able to look outside the Bible for him. And we said, if we find, if you're the true God, we're sure we'll come back to you. So about a couple months after that, I'd say within 6 months after that, we were both atheists because we had gone through the Bible and just found so many errors or mistakes or things that we thought couldn't mean divine. So we basically became atheists for about a couple months. And during that time, I noticed that for instance, one of the things I wanted to do was debate against Christians to tell them they're going down the wrong path or whatever. And I remember I was in this forum and there was this guy who popped in and said something about the age of the earth being 6,000 years. And then a bunch of people jumped on and attacked him and said, no, due to carbon dating, we know the earth is 4.54 billion years old. So I just came into the conversation knowing I'd been researching that and knowing that carbon dating isn't the way that they know the age of the earth. So I kind of butted in and said, oh, actually, it's not. It's radiometric dating. Carbon dating doesn't go back that far. And I got attacked by these atheists that came out of everywhere. And none of them had anything actually true to say other than just belittling you and putting you down and basically telling you science rules all things. And it was my first kind of glimpse into the fact that I was like, oh my goodness, I just switched religions. I went from the Christian religion to the religion of scientism, that now the dogma's on this side and the scientism's on this side. So that was really our first taste of kind of seeing, okay, let's step back and take the middle road rather than this, false dichotomy where it's either you got to pick the church or you got to pick science or you got to pick left or you got to pick right. Is it Trump or is it Biden? They want you in these separated categories so that you fight with each other. And so we just said, let's start at the middle. And we kind of got so frustrated. We said, you know what? Let's get rid of all of our beliefs. Let's get rid of them all. We've been lied to about so many things. Let's just build our beliefs based on what we can prove. So we agreed we're going to do that. Okay, great. Within the first week, she looked out our bedroom window and said, do you think the earth could be flat? And I said, what? And she said, do you think the earth could be flat? I'm like, no, planes go around it. That's ridiculous. How could planes go around a flat Earth? And she's like, I don't know. You said we were going to start our beliefs from the very beginning. And I said, yeah, but some things are fundamentally true, right? Some things are just true. We don't need to actually go back and look into them. So I kind of called her stupid and dismissed her. And over the course of that next couple of days, it was kind of bugging me. Um, but I kind of dropped it, said whatever. And I happened to be looking into moon landing stuff, and this is for another reason. It was just I was kind of thinking if the moon landings can be fake, it means that governments can fake things over long periods of time. So I was looking into the moon landing, and I stumbled across Eric Dubay's site, which was called the Atlantean Conspiracy, and that was the very first time I'd ever seen the AE model or the flat Earth model of the Earth, and it hit me like a ton of bricks because here it was a couple days before I was telling my wife she was stupid and how could planes go around it? How could planes fly around a flat Earth? And now I'm looking at a map and thinking to myself, wait a second, planes can go around it. They just fly in circles. So then I started thinking to myself, okay, well, I got to debunk this quick because it's scaring me, right? The idea of a flat Earth is frightening. So I said, what would debunk it? And I looked at the map and I said, oh, north-south circumnavigation, because I kind of realized on that AE map that you can't circumnavigate north-south. So I said, okay, well, good. I'll just look this up and find. And then I went looking like crazy and could find basically one or two people claiming to have done it. And one of them is Sir Ranulph Fiennes. He's like the world's greatest explorer, they call him. It took him like 4 years to do it, but the same guy has been in court and admitted to faking accidents, faking expeditions, faking parts of the trips, and he stood in court and had to admit that. So then I'm like, wait, and he's a Freemason and he's a cousin of the Queen. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. So we've got literally billions of people who have circumnavigated the Earth east-west, and two, if you believe these two guys, that have circumnavigated north-south. And I just couldn't rectify that. I said, there's just no way that could be the case unless you're looking at the AE map. On the AE map, that's what makes sense, right? You're looking at it saying, yeah, people can go around the Earth east and west, but they can't go north and south, which equates to what we see in reality, right? Which is billions of people have done one and nobody really has done the other. So the next thing that happened was this is towards the end of 2014. I saw there was this guy named ZQ Pilot, and he was going to try and go north-south circumnavigation and get the record for the fastest time solo in a plane. And he had this thing called Spider Tracks attached to his plane, which is like this little gadget that you can go to their website, you get it, you attach it to your plane, and it tracks everything you do on a map or whatever. So I was like, oh, I want to watch this guy do this over this course of this next couple of days. And so he had his flight plan all ready to go. He was going to fly down to Argentina, then Brazil across the South Pole to New Zealand, New Zealand to Alaska, up around the North Pole and back to his home. So he takes off and he does the first leg of the flight, the second leg, and then he lands in Brazil and he's supposed to go across the South Pole to New Zealand. So everybody's watching him. He flies to the South Pole, his plane turns around and he goes back and lands in Brazil again. So everyone's of course asking what the hell is going on. Now he's broken his flight plan. And he said, oh, I got to the South Pole and the weather was just treacherous. I couldn't go further that way. So he turned around and came back. And then he flew from Brazil to New Zealand across the Southern Ocean, and then went New Zealand to Antarctica around the North Pole and back home. And I said, well, at least they're not going to, he's not going to get the record. Sure enough, they gave him the record. And I think that was the point where I said, okay, this is really a thing. You would never give somebody a circumnavigation record who didn't circumnavigate. It's the equivalent of, remember we used to do liners in gym class where you basically run and touch the far end and come back. That's what he basically did, right? He touched the 90-degree marker and then came back and then flew around inside there. And somehow that's called circumnavigation, which it's not. So right away, I just knew that we had something here and it needed to be looked into. So from there, it's been a whirlwind of experiments and light tests and laser tests that my wife and I did, and little things along the way that added to the preponderance of evidence, as you would call it, and just discovering other truths along the way. It's been a flurry because it's a difficult thing when they have lied to you or us about everything. What it does is it makes people very careful about what they believe now, right? They're going to be careful about who they trust. So it creates a problem within the truth community that then people either aren't trusted or they'll say something wrong or they'll get something wrong and then everybody will call them a shill. Or so there's this distrust between even members of the same group, which causes, and I think that's all done by design. I think that they know that's going to happen. And so that's why, they lied to us about everything, because then you get to this point where now a lot of people will feel like, what is the truth? They can't even really know where to go to find it anymore or what to grasp. And it's part of the plan, I think, to kind of keep us disconnected and out of communication with each other, out of sync with the sky clock, out of sync with Mother Nature. And I really do think it's all by design. So that's basically it. 2015, I was a flat earther already. My wife and I became flat earthers in late 2014, and this is before any video was ever on YouTube. So we were looking on YouTube quite often to see if anybody would ever say anything about flat Earth, and just nothing, nothing. And then all of a sudden, one day in February of 2015, I happened to type in flat Earth, and up came a video called Flat Earth Clues by Mark Sargent. And I was like, well, what's this? And started watching the first one and called my wife upstairs and said, you have to watch this. And we binge watched the first, I think he had released like 4 episodes. And we binge watched those. And from that point on, we were pretty much full on flat earthers. I think we kind of became more and more as time went on because of little things that would happen or observations we would make, things that we would see. And I want to say unfortunately, but it's been 9 8 9 years. I wouldn't have liked if I told you back 8 years ago, if you said, where will you be in 8 years? If you like still arguing about the shape of the earth, probably wouldn't be what I wanted to be doing. But it became a bigger deal than I thought it would. I actually thought when we first started that we would be corrected. I kind of thought like, okay, let's just put this stuff out there. Maybe we're missing something. Some physicist is going to step forward and correct our mistake. And that didn't happen. And then as time went on, the more research we did, the more I uncovered, the more that I saw. We got websites shut down. We've got, got a planetarium shut down because the planetarium wasn't showing the North Star moving. And I kind of complained to the guy and said, how is the thing right if the North Star never moves in your planetarium, but it really does in real life? Wouldn't that mean that, in 35 years or something, your planetarium would be completely off? And he said, oh, I got to look into some. I got to look into the code. Next thing you know, the site disappears. There was a site called Earth.Null that had a flat Earth map on it where everything made sense, all the rotating wind currents and jet streams, and it looked so perfect. And it really made you wake up to the fact that the globe is just nonsense. And one day you show up on that site, and all of a sudden they changed the AE map to a south polar projection, meaning that the South Pole is in the middle and the outer rim becomes the North Pole. And it was like, why did you do that? So we reached out to him and said, why did you change the website? And he said, oh, because too many people were starting to see something about the North Pole being important. And I don't want them to think that the North Pole isn't important. So I put the South Pole. And they were like, well, do you want people to think the South Pole is important? Because now that's what you did. If before you're saying I had the North Pole in the middle, but people thought the North Pole was important, now you have the South Pole. So now you want people to think the South Pole is important. So then two or 3 days later, you go to that site and there was no more AE map. And if you go there today, you can go to earth.nullschool, Nullschool, and you'll notice that there's different types of maps. There's the globe, there's the Winkleman triple, there's all these different projections, but there no longer is the AE projection. So that's another thing. We had Stephen Hawking, who wasn't on the ALS website. I made a video about it saying, here's this guy who supposedly has lived with ALS the longest, and he isn't on the website for famous people that have ALS. And, within like 2 days, somebody messaged me and said, well, why are you lying on your videos? I'm like, what are you talking about? They said, Stephen Hawking is in the ALS website. Like, where? So I go look, and I'm like, well, we can go check my video. And we go check my video, and sure enough, he wasn't there. So they basically, within 2 days, added Stephen Hawking to the website for him having ALS, which I don't think that he did. And so it's just been things like that where they've changed. We've actually caused them to change their direction or change the way they did things. Maybe you've seen the video before of there's a guy kind of touring Google Earth, and he finds that Mars is Devon Island in northern Canada. That was me. That's my video. That's me who found that. And what else did I find? Just always, always searching, always looking. I think that I've got a pretty good idea of, how they're faking most of this. I think I've got good evidence for them faking the moon landings and faking most of space flight. I do think we're in a problem now that CGI has now gotten as good as it's going to be, and it's pretty much impossible to decipher reality from CGI at this point. However, we can still go back and look at the 70s, 80s, and 90s of NASA and see that they clearly were faking it back then. So they're probably completely faking it now. I just got done this week of winning a $500 bet against a globe believer who I bet 2 years ago when I heard Dear Moon was going to fly around the moon. First, they said 2023. And I said, yeah, right. They'll never do that. There's just no chance. And I'll bet anybody $500 who wants to bet me. Sure enough, some glober made a video saying he would bet me. And the next day he comes out in his video and says, "Oh, now I looked into it and I actually think it's going to be in 2024, so I want to rescind the bet." It's like, dude, that's not how things work. You accepted the bet. And he's like, "Well, can you please give me 2024?" And my entire audience was like, "Don't do that." And I'm like, "You know what? I'll give them all 2024. I don't care. They're not going to the moon." And sure enough, yesterday, that trip was canceled. So
Awesome.
never bet against us. Never bet on space. I'll tell anybody that, because you will. It's like betting on 37 in roulette. You can keep betting it all you want, and you can think it eventually will come. But I hate to tell you, it's not going to happen. Not going to roll.
Wow, man. What well said. I mean, thank you for all of that. I mean, all I can think of, I'm sure you know about the Wayback Machine for like examples of like when you're saying they Stephen Hawking wasn't on the website, how we can try to use the Wayback Machine, right? To try
Yep.
to
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also in my video.
yeah, like
Watch
for
it
example, I
shows.
did that with Vivek Ramaswamy, how he had his Wikipedia changed to get rid of his connection to Soros and
Hmm.
his connection with the jibby jab, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. Those guys are all good to it. They can clean up their act online. Some what you or I wouldn't be able to do. But another one of those guys talk about scam artists. His name is Naveed Jain, I think his name is.
huh.
He's the CEO of Moon Express. The guy is like been if you just search his name, Naveen Jain, in the internet, you'll find like the things that pop up are like, oh, great entrepreneur, it's so smart and so intelligent. But if you just add the word scam behind his name and search again, you'll see that he's been involved in an Intellia scam. All his companies are basically scam companies. He hid different charges in people's accounts, and maybe people hid boxes that they had to check to not get charged. And he's been sued numerous times and had to pay upwards of like $185 million in fines at some point. But he's the head of Moon Express, and it's just funny because imagine that you're sitting around, you're about to pick your CEO for Moon Express, and you're like, "All right, who do we have on the, who are we thinking about? Well, how about this guy?" And then you look at him, and you're like, "Oh, he's only been guilty of 3 different crimes of basically fraud. Yeah, let's bring him on board." You just never do that in a million years. And he's just a talker that oh, we're gonna go to the moon and find helium-3. Just wait, everybody on the Earth is gonna be rich. And it's just he's such a liar. So yeah, I was just mentioning that there's tons of those guys, and they can clean up their act. They can try and fix things on the internet. We've already noticed things disappearing on the internet like crazy. I think we were all told, right, that oh, everything on the internet's there forever. We were like, that's what was like fed to us as kids or as we grew up into the internet world. We thought like, oh, if you post a video on the internet, it's there forever, which just isn't the case. Because let's say you've got a website where you post conspiracy videos and you post JFK stuff that you have, and you've got all this stuff in your archives, and then you stop paying for your website, that stuff goes away. It's gone. So people think that stuff, just because it's been put on the internet, it's like, well, yeah, and Google could have indexed it so they know that it was on a certain page, but the video itself is gone. There's nobody hosting it. Your website went down. Your server got moved to somebody else. They erased all your content. So there's a lot of things on the internet that actually don't exist anymore that used to. So that makes it a little bit harder to find. I'm sure you guys have seen before. If you search Google, you only get about eight pages of results, and then it just ends. It used to be like 2.7 billion
Yeah,
results.
good
Now,
point.
if you pick any topic, search it, and just kind of move the little arrow forward for page 1, page 2, you'll get to like page 8, and that's just it. It just ends. So it's all been scrubbed. What you're getting now is just the mainstream propaganda, and that's the war that we're in, is trying to fight against a behemoth of a media enterprise, the Associated Press, that can get away with basically anything. They can say anything, and the whole country will believe it, which makes it very difficult to expose lies. They can demonize words like conspiracy theorist, right,
Mhm.
and
Even
things
flat
like that.
Earth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
I
don't even
mean,
know that term. I'm sure you don't either. It's but what are we, you know?
yeah, I mean, we kind of try and say true earther a little bit, just to kind of, again, if I was walking down the street and somebody said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "I'm presenting at a flat Earth conference," they would immediately throw rocks at me. Whereas I say, if I'm presenting at a true Earth conference, they'd be like, "Oh, cool," right? So we're trying to kind of get rid of that stigma, and that should be a big piece of evidence to people. If you've looked into flat Earth and found that it has any uh, credence at all, which I think most people who look into it, who are serious or honest about it, they'll even look into it and say, "Oh, well, it's a little bit more plausible than I originally thought." The reason that you didn't think it was plausible originally is because we were taught it was the dumbest belief ever. And so it should never be the case that the dumbest belief ever, you look into it and you're like, "Oh, it's not that dumb." Why would we be teaching people that it's the dumbest belief ever? So, of course, we have our reasons for believing that's the case. For me, The dumbest belief ever is believing that you're on a spinning ball in the vacuum of space that's zooming right now at 1.2 million miles per hour, and we're spinning around and on this ball Earth, and the water just stays attached, and gravity's holding us all. So that to me is the insane belief. And so what you do is you put that globe in the classroom of children, and you make it matter of fact. So we weren't even really taught about it, right? If we just questioned it, we live on that. Yep, and it spins. Yep. Uh, there was no way for us as children to even buck that, because we think that we're in a classroom, we're learning the truth. Here's this globe. They tell us that's where we live, and we adopted it in our belief system. So that's what you would do if you're going to try and convince the world to believe something that's batshit crazy, is you would indoctrinate them to believe it. And it becomes a social thing that keeps people locked in. In fact, most people who hear about flat Earth won't look into it simply because of the social stigma that comes with it. So they've done a great job. If it is the case that the Earth is flat as we think, we're going to have to do something to expose it to the world. It's not as easy as we originally thought. I remember watching the ISS live footage with my wife, right at the beginning of the whole thing, and I said, "Oh my God, we just need to show people this. When people see how fake this is, that everybody will know that space travel is fake. Then they'll know that NASA's fake." And then I would start showing people, and people would be like, "What's wrong with it?" It's like, "Well, look at that's not real." And they're like, "Yes, it is." Wow. So it was a little bit more difficult than I thought. A lot of people were on board. Obviously, I got a good response from people right from the very beginning. This is back in the heyday of YouTube, right, where there was your videos were being shared and they were being put into up next, and it was kind of the glory days. I would say 2016 into 2017. That's in fact when Flat Earth passed Donald Trump in search results or search inquiries on YouTube. So it got pretty important and pretty fast, and then they had to do something, and that's when they both did their adpocalypse and then also the demoting and the shadow banning. So if you look at my kind of career, I had 250,000 subs on YouTube. I'm sorry, I had 150,000 subs on YouTube 4 years ago, and now I'm at 160. So
Oh, same channel.
I basically moved. Yeah, I basically get like 3,000 subs a year because none of my stuff is recommended. It's not pushed into the up next. It's not put into people's feeds. So it means really the only people watching me are the people who know my show exists. So I really shouldn't expect to ever gain viewers. It's not the way YouTube does it. So pretty upsetting on that. But again, what are you going to do? I'm not going to cry about it. You just got to keep plugging ahead. I think we've done a good job of waking people up. My whole goal is just to have everybody hear that there is an alternative, because I grew up thinking there wasn't, and I thought that the globe was concrete fact, and that there was evidence that supported it, and that these guys were out there measuring distances to stars and measuring distance to planets, and they knew all these things. And then when I started looking into it, I realized that the whole story is just pieced together. It's nonsense. It's the stuff that we were taught is like uh, basically a junior high kind of even grammar school kind of uh, overview of stuff. But I'm sure you heard like Copernicus was on his deathbed when he wrote De Revolutionibus or whatever, and that Galileo was persecuted by the church. And these are the lines that we hear. But then you get along and you start researching it, and you realize that Copernicus was giving presentations of the heliocentric model 10 years before his death to popes, to Catholics. So obviously he wasn't on his deathbed when he released his book about
Mhm.
uh, his idea of the sun being at the center. And then you just go from there, and it's all basically lies. I mean, Galileo was not, put on arrest or arrested for. He was put on house arrest because he was blind and he lived in a castle. So he wasn't persecuted by the church like we're told. So the whole thing, history, especially history, you can't prove it. It's just impossible to do. You couldn't prove George Washington existed. You might think that you can, but you can't. It would be just as easy to chalk that up to a bunch of guys getting together saying, let's say George Washington was the first president. Let's say that he existed and then he looked like this and he did these great things and he did chop down a cherry tree or whatever. And
Yeah.
then you kind of put that out into the school books, and before you know it, something like that can become truth. So I don't put a lot of stock into history at all. And then I just started uncovering more science stuff that just things I used to take for granted, whether it's the speed of light, whether it's relativity, things like that. The more I looked into it, I realized that they are not true. They are same thing with, I don't know if you guys were told this. Teachers told me we know the Earth's a globe, and that in the north, the water goes down the drain a different direction than it does in the south.
It's
And
such a
then you
that's
yeah, then get
it's
older and realize that's a lie. So I mean, you don't need to lie to get the truth across. At least in my book, you'd never need to do that. Yet that's what they've done. They told us that boats going over the curve is how Aristotle or those people back then knew that the Earth was a ball. And then we go out there with our eyes and we see the boats disappear. They look like they go over the curve. And then you pull out your telescope or your camera and you zoom in and you can see the boat still there. So, of course, the immediate question from that becomes, how did they know in these days that you're saying, 200 BC, 300 BC, how would they know the Earth's a ball based on what you're saying is boats going over the curve? However, they didn't have any telescopes. They didn't have any binoculars. So it means they were seeing boats go over the curve with their eyes, which we do. We see boats disappear with our eyes, but then we realize they're still there, which means that their one proof for the Earth being a sphere back all those years ago wasn't a proof at all, which means they just got lucky. So that's the kind of weird thing that you start to uncover. You realize these stories of these ancient astronomy people, it's just not true. I'm sure you've heard Aristophanes put the sticks in the ground and did the stick and shadows, but then you go read his stuff or the stuff you can find, which is basically nothing, and you find out that he believed in a close sun, very close, like 18 times the distance to the moon, which again then renders the idea of him thinking that the sun rays were coming in parallel and renders the idea that because he believed that the sun went around the earth. So being so close, I mean, it's just some of this stuff is nonsense. If you look out, you see corpuscular rays. You don't see infinite parallel rays, which is what you have to believe to do the experiment he did. And they act like that's some sort of proof, but of course it can be done with a close light source. And if people need to know how that works, if you just think for yourself here, they basically tell us that the sun rays come in parallel everywhere. And since the earth is curving away from you, that those places down the street or down the state or wherever are actually curving away. And so the shadow at my location would be different than the shadow at that location, hence proving we're on a sphere. However, with a local small light source, like we believe the sun is, the same thing would happen. And you can prove that at your desk. Take two items that are the same, say, I don't know, lighters, and grab a flashlight and put the flashlight above one of the lighters and have a lighter to the side. And you'll notice that the shadow under the light, under the lighter underneath the light would be different than the lighter a foot to your left. So does that mean that your desk is now a sphere? That's what they basically have to have you believe. If you believe that Aristophanes proved in some way the circumference of the earth, of course he didn't, because if the sun was close to us and smaller, we would get those same effects on a flat earth. So just one thing after another like that, finding out about how they got the distance to the sun, which is guessing the distance of Venus, or I'm sorry, they guessed that Venus was the size of Earth, which that they just tell that story and science goes on about its merry way and science believers believe it. And it's insane to think that men looked up at Venus, which is a light in the sky, a little star, little planet, and said, yeah, that's probably exactly the same size of Earth. Then they did all their calculations to get the sun distance from that. And then that's what the current belief is, that they went up there and found out, oh, we just happened to get it right, that Venus is the same size of Earth. It's hogwash. It's nonsense. People believe lies and liars too much. So speed of light, atoms. I don't believe in atoms anymore. I don't believe in things like that are just models. Do they work? Can you build a working model around them? Yes. Does it mean that they are reality? Of course not. So that's basically been my job for 9 years, is just really trying to stir it up. I think I call myself the asking questions everybody else is afraid to ask, because once I got going, I just realized it's way better for me to ask questions. I don't care if people ridicule me for it. Usually I find out that they don't have a clue what the answer is. So if you ask somebody, as a glober, like how do rainbows work, they'll laugh and hee-haw at you. And then you say, no, really, explain it to me. How do rainbows work? You'll realize how quickly these people have no clue. They just stand behind the veneer of science and want to laugh at anybody who believes differently, even though they don't even understand their own model. I saw somebody the other day talking about the moon landing and saying, these guys keep asking for stars in the moon footage. And of course, there's no stars there because the sun's out. It's sunny. It's the daytime. That's why we don't see stars here on Earth. The daytime. It's like, no, dipshit, you don't even know your own model, that we have an atmosphere and the atmosphere lights up from the sun. And that's why we can't see stars during the day. So if you're on the moon where there's no atmosphere, it doesn't matter that the sun's out. You would still see all the stars. So these guys can't even grasp their own model, which makes it difficult to have debates and things like that if
Yeah.
they don't even get it. So
Well,
talk too much.
you're such an asset, man, to the truth community. You're obviously very analytical, and in my journey of truth, it's a lot of it comes down to following the money. Like, so for example, when you talked about boats going beyond the curve, I'm sure you're aware of Graham Hancock. People can come out with books about history or things are older than we're told. But then he'll ridicule flat earthers saying, like, aren't they stupid? Don't you see a boat go below the horizon? While at the same time, it contradicts people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, you can't even see the curvature. The earth is too big. And it's like, it's just a, a common fallacy. But if you go to
Yeah.
follow the money, you look at Graham Hancock and like who's paying him to, be a part of this Netflix show, and like kind of what you're alluded to, it's seeding confusion, this confusion. But for someone that wants to be analytical, I don't think it's, rocket science, pun intended, to try to separate the false from the true and to kind of, not buy into the lie, right? I mean,
I think
so
it takes balls. I think that if
a lot of courage. Yeah, you're right.
we did a measurement of ball size between flat earthers and globe earthers, I'll tell you which one will win by a mile. Because to be a glober, to be somebody who just accepts science, uh, takes no balls at all. It takes no, you're not brave, you're not daring, you're basically standing behind the words of men. It's not even your own beliefs. And that's something that was shocking to me getting into this was that the Simon Dan, the FTFE, all these anti-flat earth channel creators are all identical. They're cookie cutter, meaning that they all have the identical beliefs. And it's not like I'm saying identical and I mean sort of or kind of or close. They literally have the exact same beliefs, and it's because they just follow science. And that's the most unimpressive thing to me that I've ever seen. In fact, I don't see why those people exist. I don't mean to be rude, but if I need to know what your thoughts are on 9/11, or if I need to know what your thoughts are on the trans agenda or women playing or men playing in women's sports, I have to ask you because I can't just make assumptions about what your beliefs are because I don't know what they are. But if you were a science backer, I wouldn't need to ask you any of those things because you're the equivalent of checking a physics book. That's basically what we get from them is they just repeat, and that doesn't make them smart. Um, People think that because you get a document from a school that says you're smart, well, think about it. What school really rewarded was people who did what they were told, who followed directions, who did
Obedient,
assignments no matter what. Huh?
obedient.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what they want, right? They want people who unquestioningly follow and do what they're told. Those people become your professors. Again, Neil deGrasse Tyson being a astrophysicist, everything that he knows, he learned through a book and just memorized it. Think about it. He's never been to space. He's not going to space. It'd be like giving MDs to doctors who have never touched humans. Just doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? But in this particular science, they do. They give it, oh, here, you're very smart about this subject, even though you can't actually prove it, where you just told you what these things are and their distances and their sizes, and you just go along with it. So I've noticed that a big thing too. The other thing I've seen from these anti-flat Earth people is their constant mockery, and they're going around calling people stupid and morons. And I find it funny because I've never in my entire life seen people who are smart take time out of their day to call people that are intellectually inferior to them morons and idiots. They don't have time. They simply don't have time to do that. It's not in anybody's interest. Anybody who's smart has no desire to call other people stupid. It doesn't get them off. But these guys obviously get off on calling us stupid every day. And really, the reason for that is, I think, if I looked into it, that these guys are themselves stupid. And if you don't really trust your own intellectual abilities and you're kind of in a place where you can't say you're intellectually superior to anybody, and then all of a sudden this flat earth topic comes into play, you immediately look at that and you go, oh my God, I am smarter than people. These guys believe the earth is flat. And so they jumped on board and they created channels and they went crazy because to them, that's their chance to call other people stupid, which kind of propels themselves up in their own minds as being these intellectual, super giants. When actually, it's the least impressive thing I've ever seen. The fact that you can memorize a book and repeat it to me is not a sign of your intelligence. In fact, if you can think outside the box, if you can think about things that weren't taught to you, or maybe apply some things that were into something new, that's what's gone from our world. Is that now we're in a place where science that we're taught is the only truth. Well, how would science ever grow? How is somebody going to come along with a new science or some invention? Or because you can't even write a paper anymore and submit it to a journal because you have to be within their paradigm. So you can't come along and say the earth is flat and write a paper for electromagnetic gravitation or something like that because they will simply take your paper and throw it away because there's 400 men in there who all believe the same thing, who all spent the last 20 years working on that same thing with the same foundations. So for you to go in there, they're basically glorified gatekeepers, right? And they call it peer review, and they make it sound like it's really cool. And Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to say, "Oh, well, these people they go out and they do it, test or experiment, and then they prove evolution." And then somebody else says, "Oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the same test to try and disprove it." It's like, time out. Now you're lying. Nobody's trying to go out and disprove evolution as a scientist, because you have to believe in evolution to be a scientist. So no scientists out there like, I'm going to disprove evolution today. In fact, it's complete opposite. They try and work within that paradigm. That's where they get funding. And we've seen that, right? With all these scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they all went the same way. Bill Nye, none of them are standing up and saying, oh, no, actually, male and female are decided, even though, we know that we can dig up any body or skeleton in, 100 years, 200 years down the road, and we could right away tell whether they're a male or female. So it's clearly part of your genetics. It's not something you can decide yet. Bill Nye and people like Neil deGrasse Tyson have to be on that side, because that's the current scientific direction. So we're in for quite a treat. The people they put in front of us are certainly not impressive. Neil deGrasse Tyson's made more mistakes probably than anybody. Bill Nye is just a glorified engineering student, I think, who became, failed actor who became, or failed comedian who became an actor. And then they put him in front of us in school. And of course, we all have some, connection to him because of those school videos.
Yeah.
But really, there's nobody impressive that they, I really thought that there'd be somebody who would debate. Their reason for not debating us is they say that it gives flat Earth credibility. But they don't understand, when you debate somebody and you debunk what they're saying, that is the opposite of credibility. You destroy what they're talking about. So to say we're not going to debate them because we're giving them some sort, why not just debunk it? Why not do a Fox special that says, here's the shape of the Earth? And I'll give you one more thing and I'll let you talk. And the reason that they don't do that is, if you've seen, what I've talked about the last couple of months, we have proven without a shadow of a doubt that Stephen Hawking and the Genius program faked their Earth curvature test, where they basically use a fake helicopter and pretend that it went behind some sort of hill of water. So this is PBS. This is the Discovery Channel, Nat Geo. Stephen Hawking puts his name on it. And this is their big show to prove the shape of the Earth. And they faked the experiment. So, I mean, you have to at some point realize that there's a problem here, that there's no reason why they would ever fake an experiment when they could just go out and do it again. If helicopters really can hide behind 6 miles worth of water, then just go do that experiment. You wouldn't need to CGI in a helicopter and completely fake the observation. So, and then Nat Geo did a flat Earth test where they sent a board out, but it was an optical illusion. And then they're telling people, oh, now the board's going over the edge, but you can see the horizon way behind the boat, which means that's not the edge. And they just get away with it, and people allow them. And if one of us did that, if I faked an experiment like that, or if I faked a helicopter landing, I mean, Globers would have my head. They'd be showing up at my door to hang me. But when it's Stephen Hawking to prove the globe, they look the other way. They don't care. They honestly all believe that you can lie, you can cheat, you can steal, as long as you're promoting the globe, because they, I think, in my opinion, ultimately feel it's correct. So they kind of look at it as, it doesn't matter what we do to these flat earthers. They actually look at us as less than human, sadly. I don't look at Globers that way. I don't look at anybody and say, oh, I can play tricks on this person because he's not as intellectually advanced as I am. That's just ridiculous. But that's how these Globers act. They actually have faked documents. They have, left papers in trash and dumped it over and let the camera show that, so that a flat earther would find it and look in the trash, and there'd be a paper from some certain company or some certain branch of the government, and they'd do a video about it. And then the Globers would laugh hysterically because they faked the flat earther out. They had people emailing flat earthers and then basically saying, hey, I'm a whistleblower from NASA. And then flat earthers would get in conversations with them, do a video about it. And then the Globe side would reveal that they were the ones that were doing the emailing. So things like that are just pathetic to me. This should be over. To be honest with you, this should be over as soon as a certain group of humans start to question something like this. What should have happened is humanity as a whole, I don't care how much you love NASA and how much you love space, should have said, all right, you guys think it's fake, and turned with us to NASA and said, please prove it. Please prove that what you're doing is real. We don't need men going and protecting government agencies. It's insane. For me to go on the side of the United States government and big pharma, if you want to talk about the jab, and rally against other citizens of this country is insane. The amount of evidence I would need to do that is beyond anything else I can imagine. Yet half this country did that just years ago, right? They didn't care about the evidence, the actual data. They just, if you were not wearing a mask, they were going to film you and put you on TikTok and make fun of you. And um, so it's pretty sad what's going on. We have police or people policing the country for us. They've now got it so separated with this 50 against 50 that, back in the day, if a president won, just the whole country kind of went, okay, that's our president now, and we respect him and back him. And we're way past that now. That whoever wins the election, the other 50% of the country will literally want to burn it down because they're. And I don't believe in elections anyway, but I'm just saying that the goal of the elections is to always create this 50-50 divide. They've done it from time immemorial. It's divide and conquer. It's exactly what you would do. It's turn the blacks against the whites, turn men against women, turn parents against their children, turn, you name it, red versus blue, white versus black. And when you do that, then nobody's looking at the true culprit of the entire thing, the actual man behind the curtain, if you will. And they've done it forever. And I don't know why they would ever stop because nobody even notices.
Well, we're noticing, man. And
That's good. And I love people that are coming on doing podcasts that are starting because I always think sometimes it kind of looks like it's the same people all the time. And I'm like, where's the new people? So it's great when new people start podcasts and kind of pick up and carry the torch.
well, you have a unique perspective. I mean, being a flat earther, a true earther for almost 10 years. So you've been able to kind of like you mentioned, the way you stayed on the pulse of YouTube, waiting to see, people sharing this content. I'm into marketing. I'm sure you are too. I wish it was always accurate information through Google where you could do Google Trends and see things
Right.
like you alluded to about, flat earth being searched more than Trump. So from your understanding, do you see hope, that there's some type of
Yeah.
awakening? I try to think
Hey,
of tipping point, if we're moving towards
that's
that.
it. Tipping point, right? The tipping point is, and I've looked into some studies and they've given extremely low numbers. They've even said things like, the 10% tipping point, where once 10% of a people believes a certain thing, then the other 90% gravitate towards it. That seems a little bit crazy to me, but I can see there being a tipping point where that would happen. People are generally creatures of habit and creatures of, copying and things like that. I think that the biggest problem with this is that, and I'll tell you a story that so this is years ago, somebody told me, hey, Jeran, you want to know how to make money? Make a product or a service that makes people more lazy. And I just kind of brushed it off like, okay, whatever. And then throughout the last 10, 15 years, I've noticed that they've been right every time. Every time I see, whether it's bottled water, whether it's DoorDash, whether, all these companies that most of us would look at and think like delivery of fast food, nobody's going to go for that. They can just go there and get fast food themselves. Why would they want it delivered? Little do we know that, everybody wants it delivered, right? So these are things that I would have missed even if somebody said, Jeran, do you want to buy half of this DoorDash company for, $1,000? They're going to basically deliver fast food. I would have said no. I said, no, I don't see any reason why people would need that. But again, now knowing what I do, I look for those things that make people more lazy. Well, that kind of works in this avenue as well. So people that have already gone through school, the last thing that they want to do is be told they need to go and learn something. They don't want that. They don't. So if we come along saying the earth is flat, what you've been taught about the globe is false, the first question from them always is, well, how does this work? Well, how does the universe work? How does the sun up there? Because they've already been giving answers. And so to them, because they're lazy, they don't want to have to go look into or discover or find anything new. They want, if you're going to replace my globe, then give me new beliefs, give me the new understanding. And if we don't have that, because we don't, it would be very difficult for us to have come up with that when every expedition and map that was ever been made has been done with government money, kings and queens, monarchy money. These guys expect flat earthers from their house to have a map. Like, where's your map and model? It's like, well, we've been doing this 10 years and we've had no government money. And I can't use the military. You guys used people's children in the military to go down and map Antarctica and to create these maps and these books and these charts. And so that's why you have something that works and we have something that doesn't, is because you've had every opportunity and every dollar given to you to promote this, what we think is a lie. So, yeah, and we always give the example of, because this is what Globers do. But if I was siphoning through my parents' drawers and I found a adoption certificate, and there it is, it's got my date of birth on there. It says that I'm being adopted, and it's signed by my parents and the doctor. At that point, I have pretty good evidence that I was adopted. And if I went to you guys and say, hey, look, I was actually adopted. My parents aren't my real parents. My sister's not my real sister. And you guys said, well, who's your real parents? I said, I don't know. I just found out that they're not, my parents aren't my parents. And you said, well, I'm not going to believe you until you tell me who your real parents are. It's like, Well, I don't know who they are. That's been hidden from me. I'm showing you the evidence that I've been adopted. That's what I'm showing you. And you're like, no, I don't accept that. I only accept things once you've given me a replacement. What is the whole town in on it? Is your teachers in on it? Is the priest in on it? Well, no, they they all think that that's my real parents. So it's the same kind of deal with NASA. Is that people are like, as soon as you say NASA's fake, or what is every scientist in on it, every engineer? It's like, no, they believe what they're doing. They believe in what they're doing. They're not lying. But we don't have to. I think Austin Whitsitt calls it uh, is I forgot. He's got a saying for it that something is independent of replacement. Um, Falsification is
Yeah.
independent of replacement. Meaning, so we don't need to just because we falsify something. If we look at the globe and say, here's reasons why it's not true, that does not then require us to replace it with something. That'd be ridiculous, right? I mean, you couldn't, you couldn't do that. You wouldn't be able to do that right away, and it's going to take time to uncover those things. But yeah, that's their excuse. That guys do the same tactics all the time. They try and make it seem like if we don't know, and then those guys have never figured out anything in their life. They just simply have believed the stories told to them by the books and by the teachers. So it's much different when you're actually having to go out and test things yourself, bounce things off the wall, spitball, because when you're lied to, you have no foundation really. So a lot of times you are spitballing, you're trying different things, seeing if things work, and you will get some things wrong. Again, going back to what I said about truthers not trusting others is, somebody might get something wrong, say something wrong about a certain topic, and then everybody looks at that person as a shill rather than realizing that it's a tough job to do what we're doing. You're going to get some stuff wrong when you're basically guessing, right?
It's all about honesty, right? Not trying to like cover it up, like, oh, I never lie. I
Yeah, it's crazy. And these guys, they project themselves on us all the time. They're all so baffled. They're like, oh, when you posted that, that ISS footage, Sharon, you saw the ISS, and then you took it down, and it's like, okay, but you guys aren't even thinking about why would I put it up? Like to me, there's no thought of me ever filming this ISS and then being like, oh shit, I just saw the ISS and go in front of the moon. That's not good for flat Earth. I'm not going to post this video. And they must be like that. And I've actually proven and shown that they are. That they would never, for instance, if they go out and do an observation for a day or two, they're going to grab just the pieces that show the globe. They're going to come back and put that on their channel and act like that's all they saw. That's what they do. Because to them, they feel like uh, the globe is so true that it's okay to lie like that because all you're doing is really getting people to believe in the globe. So it's okay to lie for that reason. Whereas flat earthers, we don't do that. I come back and I show, hey, here's this boat. It does kind of look like it's over some sort of edge. And here's this boat that was going out there that doesn't look like it. Because I don't fear the truth. I don't fear being wrong. I think being wrong is not that bad because when you're wrong, guess what? You find out what's right. So if you're actually on a truth seeking journey, then being wrong should be a welcome thing. I don't see that anymore. In fact, I've seen so many truthers who say something and then they're shown to be wrong and they can't get off it. And they'll actually wreck their careers or they'll wreck their channel because they just can't get off a certain subject because they went so hard at people. I don't know if you guys know who like Zach Hubbard is. He's a guy who does gematria and some other stuff. But years ago, he went off against the flat Earth, but he went so vitrolic and so hard at it that now he'll never see it. Right? He's called so many people morons and retards and things like that. That it doesn't matter what evidence you give somebody like that. What they're really trying to do is just find any evidence that can prove them right. So they're never going to actually truly look at anything. And I remind people to be careful talking to your family and friends like this because I've seen it so many times where family and friends will basically have fights over something like this. And it really shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't have to lose family and friends over things, but I know it happens. But just be careful with that. Uh, in my opinion, I think anytime you're trying to force anything down somebody's throat, you are pushing them further away, right? So if you, because then what happens is you call them a moron, they call you a retard. Now, one of you, if anybody's going to admit that they're wrong, has to actually say, oh, my bad. You're not retarded. I'm the retard. And we just know human nature is not to do that. So I've seen families that are estranged now, brothers that won't talk to each other because they went so hard at each other. You're a moron. You're an idiot. You're a retard. Where now one of them has to take that back. And for the most part, people don't do well at doing things like that. So that's unfortunate because I have seen it many times. I don't know if you guys know people in your life that sometimes they can't exist, and we really should be able to exist with different opinions. And I feel like we went away from that. We somehow got away from recognizing that we can all exist, even if some people believe abortion is okay and some people believe that it's not. It's okay to coexist. It's okay. We can be all right, but they act like no, these people must die and these people must die. which is ridiculous. There's so many different beliefs, and people all want to believe the same thing, which is crazy to me too. Imagine if we all truly believe the same thing. Life
No,
would suck.
yeah, no one's thinking. I mean, imagine a world where it's normal to have empathy, it's normal to let somebody feel understood.
Right.
Like you talk about the issue of abortion, where all it takes is, someone sincerely seeking understanding, being like, help me understand your position. Why are you so passionate about being pro-choice? And you just listen. And then,
Right.
of course, you hope that once the person feels heard, they have the empathy to say, like, okay, now that you heard me out, what's your position? It shouldn't be rocket science. And I would like to bring our great discussion here full circle back to kind of your view now on religion or spirituality or God, because you mentioned how what was it, 2013 or something, you and your wife were atheists for a little bit. And so I am a little curious because I did
Yeah.
ask Dave
Sure.
that too, kind of as we concluded. um
You say again. I didn't hear what you said the last sentence.
Oh, I was saying just at the end of my interview of David Weiss, I kind of asked him the same about his, how he kind of viewed himself as, like an atheist or agnostic. And then now,
Gotcha.
and that's not necessarily just flat earth, but just your perspective, on God or religion or spirituality now.
Yeah, I definitely have a unique position, I think, because I'm okay being in the middle. I'm okay not knowing. And I don't think there's a lot of people like that, right? So a lot of people like to know or think they know. So they become Christian because they know the story and they know Jesus died for their sins and they know these things. And so when somebody like me comes along saying, oh, that's not true or this isn't true, they don't like that because, again, they're not getting to be lazy. They have to actually look into something or do some sort of self seeking. So, I am not the smartest person ever because clearly the way I run my channel is not the way you should. Because I think it's the way you should because I'm just honest, and that doesn't get you viewers. It actually turns people away because I'm against technically against Christianity. I guess I'm not against it, but you'll understand in a second. And I'm against science. So when you do that, I'm really leaving myself no audience. Whereas if I really cared about audience and cared about making money or something, then I would just become a Christian because that would equal more tips and that would equal more viewers. So it is kind of dumb on my part, but it's the way I've started YouTube and the way that I'll finish it is being honest. So my opinion as of now is that the Bible is written by men. I believe that even Christians would believe that. They believe it's inspired by God, but there's enough in the Bible that would tell me that we have to be careful in saying that because it even says that the angel or Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Then we're told these guys are getting visions from God and they're writing things down in a book. So how do you know it's a vision from God and not Satan acting as God? Um, the biggest thing for me was realizing that Jesus was completely different than the Old Testament God. I grew up believing in the Trinity and believing that the three gods in one. And then when I looked at the actual evidence and I saw that, one God says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, kill for a kill. And the Jesus comes along and says that forgive your enemies and turn the other cheek. One God says, he's jealous, he's vindictive, he creates darkness, he creates evil. And the other guy says, love your neighbor, love God. You've got one guy who's asked, hey, what do we do with this guy? He's picking up sticks on the Sabbath, and God says, stone him to death. And then you've got Jesus who's picking wheat on the Sabbath and is asked, why are you doing that? And he says, because the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So you start noticing these weird situations where there's two different characters. One who, again, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. The other one clearly kind of wicked, likes animal sacrifice, likes the smell of burning flesh, orders the murder of nations and of his enemies. They go out and let's go kill our enemies and let's keep the women and children for ourselves. Whereas Jesus says, love your enemies. So clearly, the God I kind of found a problem with saying, oh, Jesus can't be the Old Testament God because they're completely different. They don't have anything in common, basically at all. And so from that, I kind of started to, question whether Jesus was historical or not. And again, I come to a dead end there because you can't prove anything in history. Now you can say, oh, well, there's a lot of people who wrote about him, and there's this guy who wrote about him. Yep, but again, could that be a deception? And the answer is, of course, yes. Right? Somebody could have written in the year 400 a bunch of stuff talking about a Jesus that never existed, and we wouldn't have any way of really knowing that now, other than we just have to trust the words of men. So I kind of looked at it and I said, does the creator really is he really going to judge us for either believing or not believing in a story that we know is written by men that we know can't be proven? God says in the Bible, prove all things, test all things. And so that was something to me that was kind of weird, because if you do try and do that, you find out, some talking donkeys. Okay, that doesn't, we can try and prove all things, but we cannot find a talking donkey. So should we believe in the talking donkey in the Bible, or a man that lived in a fish for 3 days, or somebody who rises from the dead? Those things are, to me, not as important as believing in being a good person. And so I think that's ultimately my opinion. I do think that I have a different opinion now of what we're here for. I believe we're here without instructions. I believe we're here as a test. And I believe it's really a filtering for the best quality people who are good for good sake, not good because a book tells them to be. So um, if you want to prove that the Bible can't be written by God, you go to Romans 13, that says very clearly all government is placed there by God. To go against the government is to go against God. That's clearly false. And anybody who can't realize that, so you can't tell me that the Bible is perfect if it's got a clearly false statement. It says all government is placed there by God. To go against government is to go against God. So that means that when you said, no, I'm not wearing a mask, or no, I'm not getting this vaccine, or you go against the government in any way, you're actually going against God. Of course, that's ludicrous. God would never say that all governments are placed there by God, because God would recognize that some governments are corrupt. So the only people that would ever say all governments are placed there by God is government. So government wrote the Bible, not man and not God, because otherwise that would never be in there. It says pay taxes to who taxes due, which is, again, something God would never say. What if Joe Biden tomorrow said there's now a 99% income tax? Well, according to the Bible, we have to pay taxes to who taxes are due. And if Joe Biden said 99% taxes due, that's tax being due, and we would have to be required to pay it according to the Bible. Well, it's nonsense. Of course, you should stop paying taxes when your government is not using it for the right reason, but the Bible doesn't say that. It tells people to love their slaves, love your slave owners like they're Jesus, treat them as if they're God. I mean, that's insane. God would never say that. God, and the God of the Old Testament is jealous, and he's vindictive, and so he would never tell you, oh, worship your slave owners as if they're me. It's just, that's what slave owners would say. So there's enough evidence for me in the Bible that tells me that it's been altered. It's been used as a system of control. I always hear Christians say, oh, but it's held back and it's suppressed and they try and hide it. It's like, no, it's in every hotel room that I've ever been in the drawer. So it's clearly not something they're hiding. They clearly want it out there. Now, they can't make it seem like they promote it. So what they do is they kind of, because I believe Christianity creates the exact kind of people that created the world that we're in. You've got people who feel that Satan's running the world and that God will fix it. And so they're waiting for Jesus to come back and to fix the problems. And while that's happening, evil runs rampant. Children are raped, sex trafficked, you name it. The countries are drone bombed in our name and with our money. And that's pretty pathetic. And to me, it's all stemming from the same thing, which is, the story of Jesus says the meek will inherit the earth. That's tough to say, because we just have to believe that, but we don't ever get shown that. So basically, if you were wicked, if you were evil and you wanted to run this world, a great way to do so would be to convince people that they should be meek, because the meek inherits the earth. Convince people that Jesus will come and save them. Convince people that let wicked be wicked, let evil be evil, because they'll get theirs in the end, and you'll get your reward in heaven. And that it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than it is for a camel to get through an eye of a needle. That's what you would tell people if you were rich and powerful, because you want to keep the money and you don't want these people coming after your money. So you tell them that they can't go to heaven if they're rich. And, Jesus says, don't save up treasures here on earth because your treasure will be in heaven. Again, that may be the right thing. But also, if you look at the world's being run into the ground by psychopaths who have saved money over time. And now their families rule the whole world because of the generational wealth. So by Jesus telling you not to do that, he basically set the world up for being run by these, super rich banksters, because people think that they don't want to get rich, because if they get rich or if they store things for their family, that they are not going to get into heaven. So there's just enough in the Bible for me to say, I like Christians. My mom was a Christian. I think that Christianity brings good into people. My mom told me when she retired, I said, what are you going to do now? You're retired. And what are you going to do? She said, well, I still have to visit people in prison. Like, what do you mean? She said, well, Jesus said I have to visit people in prison. So when you hear that, it's hard to go against that religion because you're like, that's great. And so my mom's doing visiting people in prison because of her religion. So some parts of it are obviously um, beneficial to humanity. And I certainly would raise my child if I had a choice, if I had to choose atheist or Christian, I would put him in a Christian school 100%. But I think that we should kind of grow up a little bit and recognize that some of the stuff that we are believing seems a little bit far fetched at this point. I don't know about you. Everybody I've ever talked to that's a Christian, if I talk, they're always like, "Oh, it's the end times. It's the end times." It matches what Revelation says, and it's like, okay, recognize that throughout history, whatever year it was, people were saying the same thing. Like to think it was 1810 and people were like, "Oh, Revelation has nothing to do with now. It must be talking about the future." Is just not the way it works. That no matter what was going on in people's lives at that time, the book is written in a way that makes you think it's talking about now, that things are happening now, that it's the times of Noah now. So it creates this fight or flight mechanism in people, and they kind of, either kind of kick back, they be meek, they just let evil be run rampant because they think they're going to get saved. So that's my opinion as far as spirituality. I know for a fact that there's a creator. That goes without saying. I think that the Bible is correct when it says that all men should know that there is a creator, because if you look around, there's just no way. You don't crash a plane into a ground. You can do it a trillion times. You'll never get something out of that. Yet we're told that the universe all crashed and basically flung things out into space. And from that came human beings and animals and rivers. And again, that's just insane. So I know that there's a creator. I don't think that the creator would be somebody who would leave their life story in a book. And if they did, they would leave some things out that clearly nobody's ever explained to me or made sense. Why would you tell Abraham he needs to go kill his child on the top of some mountain? People always say to me, but he didn't. He didn't. He stopped him. It's like, no, but I'm saying God knows our hearts, right? So God didn't even need to test him, meaning that he knew whether or not Abraham would do that for him. That's what God is. God knows your heart and God knows your insides. So there's no reason for him to take it to the step of reality of telling him, go sacrifice your kid. And people are like, oh, no, but he needed to make sure he would. Well, God would know that. It's God. So people are very lost in this sauce. They kind of have to always make excuses for, if you're like, why did God kill the firstborn of all Egyptians? They're like, well, they were killing their firstborns first. It's like, yes, but we're talking about the creator of the world. Why would God kill the firstborn of you're killing children because their parents worship the wrong God, who technically doesn't exist in if God's the only God. So there's just so many things that have caused me to look back at my faith. I went to an all boys Catholic Jesuit high school, and I was very disillusioned with school right away, about junior year, sophomore year, because I couldn't understand why they were forcing us. Well, not forcing you, but you had a choice, right? Or you had to do both religious studies and science. So you're learning about evolution, you're learning about chemistry, you're learning about biology, and at the same time, you're learning religious studies. But it became this problem for me as I said, well, wait, why are we learning? I thought that evolution wasn't true. I thought that, so I kind of got this kind of stuck position. Well, now looking back, it makes all the sense in the world to me.
Mm.
Everything that they do in a Jesuit education is they want you in a belief system. And it's actually what the whole world's about, is putting you in a belief system. Because if you're in a belief system, you're predictable. They know exactly what you're going to do in certain events. They know exactly how you're going to vote. They know exactly how you're going to respond. So I encourage people to get out of that rut and get in the middle. The middle is the position that they can't guesstimate. They don't know what I'm going to do because I'm not fully adoptive to one side or the other. I leave things open. So more people need to do that, because if you just accept the stories that you're told and you just uh, buy into these, we know that they set things up, right? They basically are running the world that way. So if we might think we're getting a leg up on them, but we're not. When you buy into some side or some theory or some idea, then be careful, because that's where it becomes tough to realize your own folly. So I try not to make claims, crazy claims. I have no problem saying I don't know. People always know, what is the moon then? I don't know. And they lose their mind. They're like, well, we know it. No, you don't know what the moon is. You've been told what the moon is, and you accept that what you've been told, but you don't know. You just are thinking you're smarter than me because you believe stories that I heard already. They act like we came out of a cave and we're like flat earth, and we've never been taught anything. So they have to explain, oh, well, you don't understand. See, gravity pulls to the center of the sphere. It's like, dude, I went to school. I get it. I know how gravity's supposed to work.
Doctor,
I just don't believe that.
that, you know. Well, thank you again, man, for sharing all of that. Because the irony is science in and of itself is a religion. you know?
100%.
We talk about that, you know? So that's kind of what's funny. And the way you were talking about earlier, like the way, certain atheists were trolling you, and it's
Yeah, it
crazy.
became so clear that it's a religion because they act the exact same way. And they act like they know and that you don't, but you can't even like follow up with why they believe that. They really don't know why. It's just their position. If you ask a science believer whether or not we date dinosaur bones, they'll all say 100% yes. And that's not true. They don't date dinosaur bones. They look at the ground that they came from, and then they take the era from where the ground is, and that's what they claim. And I always tell the story. There's this 10 PhDs that sent dinosaur bones, T-Rex bones, to a lab to be carbon dated, and they came back at between 10 and 18,000 years old. And then they were doing a symposium or a presentation about this, and the Science Foundation found out about it, and the lab found out about it, and they went and removed them from this conference. They took away their paper. They basically were chastised and told they can never send things to the lab again. And the reason for that is because you have to tell a lab that you're sending them dinosaur bones. Because if you don't, and they date them, they come back 10 to 18,000 years old. But if you tell them, hey, these are dinosaur bones, then they punch little buttons in the machine, and then they come back at 86 million years old. So again, people don't really think about the things that they're told. They believe in atoms. They believe that there's a proton and a neutron, and that a thing is orbiting a nucleus, and it's just crazy. Like, what do you mean? We can't even see an atom, but you know what's going on inside of an atom. Now, just because it's a model and it works doesn't mean that it's reality. And I think people miss that a lot. They really think that these things are reality, or that we figured out the speed of light. I mean, go back and look at the stories of how they were literally lighting candles and bouncing them off mirrors with pendulum clocks. People are like thinking that this is legit science. It's not. None of this stuff is. And gravity is their big baby, and this is the one that they'll never get rid of. And this is why dark matter and dark energy exist, is because gravity doesn't work in the greater universe, and so they made up something, which isn't at all what science does. Science never says. Feynman says if you have a theory and the observations don't match the theory, you throw away the theory.
Yep.
So if we have a gravitational theory and observationally it doesn't match, then you're supposed to throw it away. They can't do that because gravity is the only thing that makes the Earth a sphere. So instead of throwing away their theory, they added what they need, which is dark energy and dark mass that don't exist, that have never been seen. And now we just have that as part of our world. And if you ask me, like, is dark energy and dark matter real? They're like, yes, oh yeah, it is. Yeah, but that's not how you do science. You can't just add. I always tell people, like, if next time somebody asks me, how do the sun and moon stay up in the sky? I'm going to say, well, dark lift. And I'd be like, what's that? And be like, well, they have to stay up there somehow. And so we figure it's dark lift. So we're just going to say that. And now our problems are fixed and our mathematics works. That's literally what they did. That's literally how dark matter works, is that it's just a placeholder mathematically. And we're like supposed to be impressed. Don't be impressed. These guys are woefully lacking. It's hilarious that I don't know if you ever heard the one, right? Like, we're little fleas on the earth. We're like little tiny bugs, and that's why we can't see the curve.
Amoebas too,
But
right?
we're
Amoebas.
supposed to believe that these little bugs are so smart, the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the bugs, that they actually polished up some glass and now they see back in time. So, I mean, that's literally what we're told, that this is what these guys do. They look in telescopes and they see back in time. They can see stars that are, 50 billion light years old, meaning that the light left there 50 billion years ago. It's insanity to even think that that would be the case, and that we would live in the 50-year period of time that humanity went from not knowing anything to now we know the Earth is 4.54 billion years old. If
Yeah.
you think that we know that, you're sorely mistaken. Look into the age of trees. Trees are, at the most a couple thousand years old.
Yeah.
So the Earth is probably young, and
Well,
probably goes through some resets. What do you guys think about resets? Do you think there's a periodic or cyclic resets?
I mean, think about it in just daily life all the time. I'm a realtor. So yesterday I'm at an open house and I get there, the AC is not working. So guess what I do? I reset it, and then
Yeah.
the owner calls me and he's like, having me troubleshoot it by resetting it. And it's like I'm like, oh, I already reset it. We always know like reset
Right.
something, so it's kind of like kind of common, I mean, in my opinion, when we really think about like how many times we're dealing with a problem, and the best way to fix it is just to reset it.
Yeah. And it seems like that's what they do, and that they might be able to just, and that's what scares me the most about what I do is I wonder, are they just taking notes from everything that we're doing? And then when they do the reset, now they come back the next time and they've cleaned up more of their act. because people like what we're doing are exposing and they're able to see, oh, they did catch that. Oh, they did see this. Fix that. Let's fix this. And then come back next time
Do you
with a better.
resonate with? I also brought this up to Dave about how they can't violate our free will.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that
They have to trick us, or they, you know what I mean?
I think that they think they've got some things figured out, and I don't think that they do. Maybe they were told that these things are true. It cannot be. There's no way that the rules of the universe are that if you trick somebody else to go kill people in war, that it's on them and not you. I mean, they might think that, but there's just, in my opinion, that can't be the case. The creator wouldn't leave a loophole like that, be like, oh, just trick people and you get away with it. But they might think that. They might think because they physically don't do it that it's not on their soul. But I don't think anybody knows. I think the point of this life is that we don't know. When you don't know, it's very easy for, I'm just kind of putting myself in God's position. He's looking at everybody on the earth and he's basing whether or not they can graduate to the next level or the next dimension on how they act here. And so if you quickly gravitate to a certain belief system and what men tells you, and you go into that kind of mode, um, I think that those things are not the correct way. If you worship God, I had a guy I was debating the other day, Christian, and I asked him, "Would you worship God no matter what he did?" And he said yes. And I'm like, man, I just don't know if you think that's a good thing. Like, if the creator would not be impressed if you said, no matter what he does, I'm going to worship him. That's not what we're supposed to worship. We don't just worship people, but he created us, so we have to worship him. I'm like, no, you don't. That should be easy enough for you to see that that would be a test, is to whether or not you show devotion and worship to something just because it created you. I mean, your parents created you, great. You love them, great. But if they're murderers, anybody would tell you that you should tell on them. You should probably turn them in, that you should not associate with them, that you should call out their immoral behaviors. Yet people are afraid to do that about God. The book has him doing immoral behaviors. He tells people, bring a turtle dove into my church and wring its head off, break its neck, and sprinkle its blood on my altar 7 times. That's not God. That's a demon. And yet people go around worshiping that, calling that God. So, these things are what's all in my mind all the time. I think it's one of the biggest conversations that there is to have. But I don't like to upset people, because if you're a good person, I don't think it matters whether you're Christian or whether you're Buddhist or whether you're Hindu. You're a good person. You help others. You follow the 10 Commandments, because I think those are pretty general. And for the most part, I don't think you need to hear those to know those. There's some missing from there that probably should be in there. But I believe in Jesus's 2 commandments: love your neighbor and love God. And I think if you do those 2 things, that you'll be rewarded.
Yeah. And obviously that whole forgive, whatever the idea of forgive for the ignorance. And well, I do got to say, I want to respect your time. I am curious about your thoughts on stateless society and then the documentary Thrive, if you've seen that, because I've been in communication with the producer Foster Gamble, and I'm trying to.
Which one's Thrive? That's the one.
So Thrive came out on November 11/11/2011, and it was all about the bigger picture, like they claim they call it the global domination agenda, but the idea of just the type of enslavement that's been going on. And it's almost 3 hours long, but what's important is like the last hour tries to focus on solutions, but it's the whole idea that more than half of solving a problem is accurately diagnosing the root cause. So we
Right.
understand there's like this parasitic financial elite per se, and this idea of the global domination agenda, even though not into the globe, but we still call it that. The globalists want us to buy into the globe through global warming, a carbon tax. So, anyways, the second Thrive came out, which tried to be all about free energy and showing how it can be possible. But for some reason, I get really skeptical about this because I worked with a physicist, Nassim Haramein, who allegedly has been studying, unified geometry for 30 years and ancient civilizations and so on, but, gets funding to produce a paper called Quantum Gravity and Holographic Mass, and just complete nonsense. And when I worked with him, part of what I was helping do is to try to describe like Coriolis effect, in terms for a 7-year-old. And, so now I just question it all. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because Foster is an expert in stateless societies. And it gives me a lot of peace of mind because a lot of people are aware of what we call a libertarian, somebody who wants the smallest possible government. But then the next step up is called a voluntarist or an anarcho-capitalist. And
Right.
the whole idea is we have a society organized around a non-aggression principle where nobody can initiate, force on anybody else or aggression, because the issue is what we call government has a monopoly on violence, on force, So on
Uh,
my so kind of it's just something I wanted to put out there if you've looked into this.
Yeah, I
Fostering.
have. It's one of the most difficult topics too, because I think that I look at it a little differently than everybody. It's very easy to jump on the anarchy, train, which I would consider myself an anarcho-capitalist a while back, but I guess I just realized that there needs to be some laws. For instance, the age of consent. So if we talk about being in a non-aggression uh, situation where we're just going to leave everybody be, well, what is the age of consent in that society? And we can't have guys who are grooming 13-year-old girls, and because they're not being aggressive with them, and we're just like, well, he's not hurting her, and not, we can't hurt him. No, there's a problem. We need to stop that. There needs to be a law that stops that. So again, ideally, in a perfect world, you would not have that. And so the idea of a governmentless society works. But in every other case I can think of, there's always going to be, for instance, let's say when you are discriminating against somebody. So we discriminate against children every day. Children are not allowed to drive cars. They're not allowed to smoke cigarettes. They're not allowed to purchase rental cars. That's actually discrimination, and it's actually agreed upon by adults who agreed on discriminating children. So if you don't have laws and you just have then what, children can drive at any age. Children can, again, this is where it becomes a problem. Or like I've said before, this non-aggression thing works until somebody stops paying my rent, right? So if somebody rents my house and says, oh, I'll pay you $800 a month, great, live here, you pay $800 a month. They pay it for 2 months and they stop paying. Well, now we've got a problem in the non-aggression world, because there will be aggression that needs to be taken out. Aggression is the threat that keeps people in line. In fact, everything that we do is predicated on the idea of physical harm if you break the law. We don't really realize it, but everything that we do, you don't speed because of the threat of physical harm. It's not because you're afraid of, oh, the cop's going to pull me over. It's that ultimately enough of those will lead to them putting you in jail, physically dragging you into jail. So everything is a threat of harm. Government does have a monopoly on it. Obviously, they commit crimes constantly. So I do think less government is key, huge. There's way too much government now, and government now is just disaster because they do things like what's going on with Pride and stuff like that, where they go too far and then it becomes lopsided the other way. And now we've got, women's sports are a disaster. You've got all these guys winning every competition. And it's because they went to the point of saying, well, it's all inclusive. Everything's the same. Everybody's equal, which just isn't the case. I mean, even if somebody were to ask me, Jeran, or do you have any problems with gay people? Well, if they're adults, consenting adults, that's their own business. They'll be judged on their own. That's not my business. But to say that they're equal is completely insane. What do you mean? We're all here. We're all product of heterosexual behavior. None of us are here because of gay behavior. So they can't be equal, because if they were equal and you just, how would that be possible? One is a preferred situation because it brings more people into the world. So anyway, I know it's a long-winded answer. To me, I do believe in the anarchy idea. I would love to live without rulers because I'm a good person. And I think I could easily live with other people and we would be able to get along and there would be no issues. But in any world like that, there's always going to be dirtbags looking to get over on you. You'll never have a world where everybody just keeps their doors unlocked and nobody steals anything from anybody, because there will always be somebody on that lower end of the society that is not making money enough to get by. And so they're going to resort to taking advantage of you, which means going into your house when you're not home because you left your door open and stealing from you. So if that person does that, again, they need to be punished. But I do think we can do things like with private police forces. The police that we have now is just horrendous. It should work that you have a small community, you hire a police force. If you find out they're beating black people for no reason, then you get rid of them and you get a new police force. And that's supply and demand, and that's competition that we don't have anymore. Everything's now, these corporations are running, like I told you, Longs and CVS. CVS is just, they don't care about customers anymore. The whole, we grew up thinking the customer's always right, right? Those days are so far gone because CVS doesn't give a shit about you at all because they make money hand over foot. They've got, I think it's 8,400 stores now. So they literally don't care if you have a bad experience or something like that. Whereas in the old days, it was so important, like a mom and pop restaurant, or they needed to keep your business because they had a very small town. And so they would go out of their way to make sure you remained a client so that down the road you would continue to give them money 10 years down the road as they could continue to keep their store open. But nowadays, it's not like that anymore. CVS doesn't care. None of these corporations care. Walmart, these guys are paying people pennies and their CEOs are making millions for working half as much. Yeah, the world is just so far gone. You got like 1% of the people that own 99% of the wealth. That'll never work. It'll never continue. So we will have some blow up in our lifetimes, I guarantee you, where things are going to have to go a different direction.
I hear you. And just to clarify a little bit, I mean, I was alluding to like a transitioning in phases because the way
Right.
I
Good
see
point.
it, it's like, what is a criminal? I mean, at one point, weren't they an innocent child? You're a father, right? I mean, think about it. It's like, so a criminal was really just a innocent child that at some point got abused, traumatized, something happened, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, I don't know. I've had a vision for a while. I call it going from traumatized to self-actualized, and just
Okay.
how enough of us that are, really seeking the truth, when we come together and we start envisioning like the future and that our thoughts create reality. So the idea, people like, and it is what it is, the Dalai Lama at some point, he mentioned like if every child learns meditation, we'll eliminate violence in one generation. So like I'm trying to talk about,
Yeah.
all the energy we put into, believing people believing NASA or the lies. It's like just a small amount of that energy going towards this, really trying to address kind of like this root cause where if
I
it's
love
just
that. So solutions, right? You're looking for solutions, which is so important. And yeah, I totally want to do that. And in fact, right now we're thinking about moving to Texas and we want to get like a little commune, get some land, find some like-minded people. Because
yeah,
I don't know if we're really going to be in a place to defeat this government right yet. It doesn't seem like um, it's kind of, we do need to do that. I think we're way past the point that our founding fathers were 1776, if you want to believe that, that what they had problems with with Britain is nothing compared to what we have. The tracking, the surveillance, uh, the fiat money, everything. So we are way past that position. But they've also done a good job of feminizing uh, men, and they've done a good job of putting soy in everything, and they've just done a really good job of with fluoride of making people not as cognitively sharp as. I mean, go read letters written in 1900, and you'll realize that people back then were 100 times smarter than us, but it's because we've been like fed information. If I asked you who's, Catherine Zeta Jones's husband, you would know that. And that's sad because it doesn't need to be something that you know. And nobody in the year 1800, 1900 needed to know that kind of information. But that's what they've done is now we know that, Zach and Screech and Kelly and Jesse and these people from, Saved by the Bell, we know their names, which is pathetic, but it's kind of done on purpose. It just filled our minds with useless information. So we are definitely being dumbed down on purpose. The phones aren't helping, but I do agree with you that I think that it is possible. We can manifest things like that, and I believe in starting small, and
yeah,
like you said, growing from there. If you have a family of 10 or 10 families that can live on the same land and help each other out, and you've got one lady that teaches all the children, and you've got somebody who farms, and I think that's the ultimate goal would be to live in somewhere like that and really remove yourself from society. I often think about the news. If people just turned off the news, like the news makes it seem like things are happening in your life that are not, right? I
yeah,
mean, if you remember when black people were shot or whatever the year that George Floyd and all that stuff went down, Brianna Banks, is that her name? Brianna something. But
yeah,
anyway, if you really look at that and kind of stand back, like none of those things were happening in those people's towns, but then everybody went and they protested in their cities and against their cops, and that's because of the TV. The TV does that. Things like that should be just handled at home. They don't need to be televised because people glorify violence and glorify these events, and then it just catches on, and then you've got everybody thinking these things are happening to them. It's why they love to show you war on TV because they want to pull at the heartstrings, and if you constantly see these images of war, it makes you feel so. that we should be over there and we should bring democracy, and it's all just fabrication. The box is one of the worst things that's ever happened to people. The phone as well. Um,
I
but yeah, that combined with it's same thing they do with porn. They were able to use porn to weaponize against relationships, couples, men, um, in a really fierce way. And we know nothing's for free, yet porn's for free. So whenever you see something like that, you know that there's another agenda there, and
yeah,
you can start to see it's obvious in everyday life now. I do consultations for couples and men, and I hear the same story every time, and it's like uh, these evil, wicked psychopaths. They are hell bent on taking this place down. I don't know if there's some end in sight where they think there's some reset coming, but they definitely seem to be working towards uh, a world where they are in charge and they've got a bunch of robot-like slaves that are happy to live in the metaverse, are happy to watch porn on their headsets and build things for the elite. I think that's ultimately what these guys want.
I love your vision, man, and I'm here to help. I've been a permaculture designer
I
for
love permaculture.
over
Cool.
a decade, man. It's why I got into real estate to try to really have it come full circle, and eventually
You're in
help.
Florida, you said?
I'm in Florida. I'm actually not far from Austin, so I haven't made any contact with him. At some point, if you could put me in contact with him, I would love that because I know he's in the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah.
I'm in an area near Dunedin, so I'm really looking forward to because like I told Dave, I mean, I'm about face to face and networking, and that's kind of why I think to wrap up, do you have any conferences in the near future you're thinking about speaking at or
We will
how
have some. We're behind one of our. We were doing these truer summits, and because Austin got busy and I got busy, we skipped the last one. So we should have one here at the end of June, and we're going to be behind on that one. So we do have two coming up pretty quickly. What those are nice is we just wanted to make an event, Austin and I, where we could invite great speakers to come and present. We wanted to pay them for their work because it's something that nobody does for. If Austin and I get invited to speak at places, we don't ever get paid. So we kind of said, let's do it and let's pay people. So we did that, and we came up with a method that
that's awesome.
if they got people to sign up and come, that they would get $20 of the $50 sign up. So people were making money coming, and the event was really going well. We had I think we've had four of them. So those are you can go to trueearther.com for that stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, what else is coming up? No, we're just continuing to plug away. I think that this last experiment, this final experiment, is kind of interesting. They're planning on sending some people down to Antarctica supposedly for the midnight sun there, which I don't believe exists. And so it will be interesting to see how they cancel the trip or what's going to happen. Because the last thing that I think is going to happen is people will go down there and actually observe a sun going around your head. I don't think it happens. And if it did, we would have tons of footage of it, including the South Pole webcams would have one 24-hour sun video rather than from 2004 to 2016. They have zero videos. They're all cut 8 hours into the video for some strange reason, which is what you would expect if the earth was flat because you wouldn't have 24-hour videos of the sun in the south. So that's
Cool.
my focus kind of now, and helping these guys get on some shows. I have a VIP group if you're interested in joining that. We have every other, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The first and third Saturdays of the month, we have VIP only hangouts. So the first one, we had Dave Weiss joined us. So Dave, basically people could ask him questions, just hanging out. We had Rose 777 as the second one, and we just had our third event this past Saturday, and Austin Whitsitt was with us. And then the next one is June 15th, and we've got Conspiracy Music Guru joining us for that one. So becoming VIP, you get access to all my videos. All that stuff is on Telegram, some private groups, discounts on consultation. So check that out. You can go to whopwap.com/Jeranism. No Italian jokes, please.
I'll make sure to put all those links, man, once I get this video up and
Awesome.
yeah, I'll share it with you. But this has been fantastic. I'm really grateful for getting to know you a little bit more and more importantly, staying in touch, man, and just, being able to keep the positivity, because there's a lot
Mm. So
of
what's your agenda? What's your plan? What's your outlook? If I said, what do where do you want to be a year from now?
that's a great question. I mean, to be frank with you, I've been dating a fundamentalist Christian for
Nice.
4 years, man. But you know, we were living together, and she kind of was expecting that I would propose to her and, just kind of with some of those beliefs, like you don't live
Right.
with someone, you know what I mean? And I just kind of felt pressure. And without me rambling, my parents divorced when I was an infant. I was born in Canada. And
Hmm.
I just, I was raised by a single mom. She has her master's in science education. But I will
Hmm.
say, I mean, I could go on and on, but on Mother's Day, I mentioned to her how I was about to interview Flat Earth Dave and kick off this new podcast. And of course, she kind of tried to laugh and ridicule a little bit, but I just kind of gently, I think of it as like Aikido, where instead of like, saying anything negative to her, I just said, Mom, it's important to seek understanding and to be curious and to just kind of trust that I wouldn't just say something like this, because personally, I didn't start researching flat Earth until January of this year. And it
Hmm.
was because during COVID, I worked full time for the National Health Federation. It's the
Hmm.
world's oldest health freedom organization. They were actually formed in California in 1955, and I was initially on our board of governors, which was a non-paid position. And this was simultaneously as I was trying to juggle real estate, but I had just gotten my license. And, it takes time to, get traction. But anyways, one thing led to another. We hired a lobbyist because we needed to protect, against all of this draconian stuff that was going on. And then I really hit it off with this lobbyist because he's a Kundalini yoga teacher. That's something that kind of I got into a couple years after I graduated high school. That kind of started somewhat of my spiritual awakening or just questioning things. And so he kind of took me under his wing, and I became a lobbyist for the state of Florida, and that
Uh-huh.
got me meeting with a lot of staff for our Congress critters. And I gave Governor DeSantis a Health Freedom Hero Award on behalf of our organization. Was in contact with our Surgeon General, Joseph Ladapo, who used to be from California. But anyways, Charlie's the one who encouraged me to watch when Flat Earth Dave was on his show, because Charlie does a Freedom Hub, and I don't know, he interviewed like 100 people in 2023, and his most viewed show was Flat Earth Dave. So I had a friend. I lived in Kauai almost 5 years. I went to school for farm business management. I became a master gardener out there, kind of went out there to just reset myself, in nature. And basically, a buddy in 2017 was like, dude, he was waking me up to flat Earth, to mud floods. He was telling me about, the truth floats on an ocean of bullshit. Was telling me about Duper's Delight, to start detecting deception, and all these
Right.
people, they can't control it when they're deceiving us, they let off a little Duper's Delight. So, anyways, though, even though he was encouraging me and I was open-minded to it, I just still kind of had a little bit of that cognitive dissonance. I mean,
Of
it's all
course.
we all went through, right? When your wife brought it up to you, we all go through it. But so finally, then in January of this year, I started watching, and I've watched so many of Flat Earth Dave's videos, and then I found Austin, and then same time, I had been looking into the old world or Tartaria since January 2022, because basically because I was working full time for NHF, I was keeping my pulse on the Freedom Convoy in Canada because I really resonated with that because, I was born there. And a person I had interviewed 4 years ago, his name's Matt Belair. He was a high performance coach for like Olympic athletes and things like that. He went to Ottawa, and at some point he just dropped a hint like look into Tartaria. And that just completely transformed my whole world, because I started looking into that Tartaria, history being
Crazy
alive.
rabbit hole, huh?
Yeah, and then somehow through that, I then became curious about Florida. And then next thing I know, a channel pops up, like you said, Old World Florida appears. And
It's
then
awesome. Yeah.
it was just crazy. And then boom, here I go. I interviewed him, earlier today too. But anyway, so to answer your question, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing, man, with selling houses and using that as a vehicle to do the permaculture vision that I'm really passionate about, when it comes to either securing land with other people, coming together, getting land, designing it in an intelligent way so we're working towards self-sufficiency,
Right. Yeah, I
you know.
think as long as we're taking those steps, and I don't, I always tell people don't get locked into the let's watch the news every day and let's debunk everything and let's tear everything apart. Because if you do that, you're just wasting your life away, right? I mean, that's probably what they want you to do is just worry about conspiracies your entire life, and then you get to be 80 and but you can't walk anymore, and then you go away. So, I think it's more important to make steps at improving your life and the lives of those around you, um, as
Yeah.
much as you can, as often as you can.
Do you have how many kids do you have?
Two, 25 and three. You're
Okay.
smart, right?
That's
Yeah.
well, see, what's funny is I don't even have kids, but that's what motivates me, man, because technically didn't really have a father growing up. I'm not
Right.
upset about it, I feel like God has taught me that part of my purpose is to be the best father I can be, so it kind of comes full circle. So I kind of bring up what I mentioned about the relationship I'd been in and so
Uh,
on, just if there's a way that it can work out somehow, with such a conflict of worldview, because really it's like I resonated so much with what you said because it's not really about her beliefs or worldview or mine. It's about the children and the idea of me walking my talk, what I'm telling you that I
yeah.
don't, I feel like I was kind of a little maybe traumatized. I mean, I don't know, the globe or believing, oh, the asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs. Any day the sun could
Right.
explode. I mean, all this weird stuff that affects our psychology and our subconscious and how I want, my kids to just grow up being natural and curious and not being indoctrinated, really, whether it's scientism or religion. But sorry for being long-winded, but
No,
hey,
it's great. And it feels so much better to hear that. And that's how it was with my second son. Obviously, I wasn't awake for the first. So he was treated basically regular, but our 3-year-old, completely untouched. Um, so that's really nice to know that we've done that. And he seems like he's got a connection with that world that we don't really have a connection with. So it'd be interesting to see how he grows up, being not drugged to death like we were.
yeah. Well, healing's possible, man. The body is amazing. That's
Body's
what we
amazing.
learned,
Totally.
whether it's been in Hawaii or whatever. It's like if
Yeah,
we put ourselves in a healthy environment, we can detox and we can overcome a lot of limitations.
100%.
We're a lot more,
And that's another thing. If people are
yeah.
out there that hear all these detox things and get healthy, is to my advice is take one at a time. That anytime you hear a bunch of things, it becomes overwhelming and you just shut off and you're like, "Ah, that's too many things for me to fix." But and that was my case. I was hearing all these things. This is 6, 7 years ago. It seemed like too much. And then Dave Weiss kept telling me to get a water distiller, and I kept saying, "Oh, it's too expensive. It's $300, and I don't want to get that." And then he bought me one for Christmas and we started using it and I immediately felt better. And from that point on, now anytime we can, we incorporate some new avenue of, and I mean, I've lost all this weight and feel so much better and really have come a long way health wise. Whereas before I was going the wrong direction. And so I do think anytime you hear these things, uh, just take them one at a time. I like to promote things that don't cost anybody money because I think that makes it so that people can trust you, right? If I hear some product or something and it's 39.99, immediately I start thinking, okay, it would be very easy to put a fake product out, get a bunch of people to pay 39.99, and then you're pretty rich off of your product that doesn't even have to work. So I always look for things that don't really like distilled water. As far as that goes, Dave Weiss isn't making money by me buying a distiller. It's another thing Dave Weiss said one time is I was complaining about my back hurting in the mornings, and he said, "Oh, you need to incline your bed." Like, what's that? And he said, "Oh, incline bed therapy. If you have a king size bed, tip it up to be like 5 degrees up in a tilt." And then I start looking into that, and I realized that there's all this studies about how much better that is for your health. And sure enough, I try it, and I immediately stop snoring and immediately stop having backaches. So, actually, it took me about a week because during that first week, you keep waking up and you're halfway down your bed because you fell down. But then after the week, you're fine. But little things like that, I always look at that are, and I pass on to people and look at, hey, try this incline bed therapy. It'll cost you nothing. Go grab a cinder block and put it underneath your bed, and check out how you feel after a week. And like grounding, I talk to people about grounding.
Mhm.
We are electrical beings, and by them putting concrete on the floor and then putting rubber on your shoes, you have lost the connection with the earth. Now think about, some people probably have not touched or grounded with the earth in years, which is insane to think about. So every day, my wife and I and my son, we go out and wet the grass with a hose, and then we stand on the grass for 15 minutes and get that connection. Again, it's free. So something like that, I don't think when I hear that from other people that they're trying to get one over on me, they're not making any money by me doing that. And when I do it, we feel better and we do feel that connection, and it supposedly helps repair some of those cells that maybe are overcharged, and you just keep not ever grounding it. It's just like something on the earth that's, or a pinball machine that it doesn't have any grounding. It's just going to gain shock until it shocks somebody. Um, so just little things like that. Anything you can start distilled water. Shilajit is a great item.
Mhm.
A lot of people, I don't drink caffeine. I don't drink alcohol. So Shilajit really gives me a nice little boost in the mornings. So things like that. I'm always trying to share anything that we're learning, anything that can make people's lives better. So I appreciate you doing the same thing.
Yeah, while I can't help, do you know about the moringa tree? Some
No, tell
people.
me about it.
So the moringa tree, when I first learned about permaculture, in permaculture, we analyze plants based on their functions, their uses, and then when we design a landscape, we take that all into consideration. It's kind of like earlier when we were talking about how people, you mentioned Catherine Zeta-Jones, people knowing that shit. It's kind of like imagine with kids, sometimes you can show them brands and they'll be like, oh, that's Nike or that's Adidas. But then if you try to show them like a leaf, you know,
Right.
identify plants. So, anyways, moringa contains 92 nutrients. It's a complete plant protein. I could go on and on. The leaves contain like 7 times the vitamin C of oranges. And kind of my story with it was I used to take a product called Green Vibrance, and then I also would do wheatgrass shots. And then
Okay.
I met an urban farmer who lives, he did live in Newport Richey. He just passed on the farm to a younger apprentice, but everything changed when I met this man because he had a house that he had paid off. This was back in 2012, so it wasn't like, super expensive, but he preferred to sleep in a tent underneath a starfruit tree, because he was so in tune with his land and he converted his whole yard into a farm and he had moringa trees growing. And so he would harvest the leaves and he would, take the stems off the leaves, dry them, make a powder, and then put them in mason jars. So then when I
Okay.
met him, like I felt like my whole brain, whatever we call it, neuroplasticity. I had my mom with me. I have a brother who's now 22, but at the time he was like 12. And I just felt like, wow, this man's collecting rainwater. He's making an income, selling his produce. And even though he had an older truck that he would use sometimes to drive, he would use a bike to like transport his produce, to the local health food store and to other neighbors, and it just all of this blew my mind. And when I'm like, what are you doing? And permaculture, so it's like when I really started learning permaculture. And then since then, I've gone from being a, certified designer to advanced and multiple certifications and teacher. And so anyways, I have a company called Moringa Man because people started calling me the Moringa Man. So my website's the Moringa Man. I'm happy to send you some, just for your time and
That'd be
everything.
awesome. I'm looking at it right now. I got some trees this year from Fast Growing Trees. I do see they have that tree, but it's
Yeah.
pretty expensive. About 240 for a 6 to 7 foot.
How much? What? That's crazy.
$240, but 6 to 7 feet is probably a few years old. They usually
They grow really fast. I mean, I don't
do
want
they.
to bore you with all the details, but there's a plant compound called zeton, which is responsible for vegetative growth, and allegedly moringa contains like the highest concentration of it. So it can grow so quickly. So a lot of commercial growers, they don't really let the bark grow too much because
Okay.
it will just be fresh green growth, and then that way they just harvest the leaves. But I have partners in India because that's where the moringa tree is native to. And in India, there's what's called Ayurvedic medicine. It's like the world's oldest
Yeah.
system of medicine. So I kind of give respect to that. And it's coming from very South India. So it's kind of away from populated areas. And they claim the
You sell the trees on your site or you sell the product?
I mainly sell the product, but I have sold trees. Technically, I should be like a licensed nursery, so it's like I'm not trying to. I
Right.
worked with a farmer before who would handle that for me. Recently, though, I partnered with Old World Florida, and it's been great, man. I'm kind of sponsoring his channel a little bit, giving him a percentage of sales. And I ran out of all the trees I had in my nursery. I have a backyard nursery with probably 300 plants.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I'm just really passionate. And what's funny is my mom
Stuff, yeah.
kind of encouraged me to study the plant more because what's so unique about moringa is the seeds can turn sewage into drinking water. So let's say you have a liter of raw sewage. All you need is like four moringa seeds. You crush them because actually the oil can be like an industrial lubricant. It doesn't go rancid. So I mean that's what I mean about permaculture, like all the uses of the plant. But
Yeah.
anyway, you take four seeds that you crushed, you put it in the sewage, and basically you shake up the liter of it, and what happens is the seeds contain a natural flocculant that coagulates all the contaminants in the water, and it basically will like sink. So then the water on the top is safe for drinking, or you can, filter it more. So we all know like whatever the estimate is, 90% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, and like you learned about the distilled water and making a little change. So I could go on and on, but it's kind of part of my service. It's like it is a business, I work hard
Good.
competing with like Amazon, where you buy supplements from Amazon, you don't know how old it is or the traceability fully of it or what. But like for example, the moringa I have in stock right now, the trees were harvested in April of this year, and so it's super, super fresh.
Is the
And
website themoringaman.com?
yep, themoringaman.com. So my main product is capsules, but I've worked with clients before where they do white label, private label. My team can, have a label made and slap the label on and have it shipped directly to their customers or shipped to them. There's some health food stores that I've supplied for a few years. They sell it in their deli for their juice bar and smoothies as like an add-in, and then they make like a latte with moringa, and then there's even like
All
a
right.
bulk spice section. So it's something
Let's
that
talk about it because it might be something I'm interested in selling. I want to look a little bit more into the
yeah,
to the
I'll
idea, but
I'll
it
send
looks
you
great.
a couple of these pouches, and then I'll send you some samples too. And I'm
Yeah,
just
please do.
yeah, I personally take 3 to 4 capsules daily.
Okay.
And that would be the equivalent, though, of 6 to 8 of these because the capsules I take are double the size because I don't usually use the moringa that I sell because I get the bulk powder and then I have a capsule maker. So then I'll make 100 capsules at a time. Um, but yeah, man, I
Great.
know.
Yeah, send me any information on the white label stuff. I'd be interested in maybe
Yeah,
selling, to be good.
yeah, sounds good, man. And if anything, it's funny because Dave said, he just feels good all the time, so he couldn't really tell if, the moringa was helping with more energy. But the idea is the nutrition, and the more nutrition we have,
Yeah,
like,
that's why it's good for me. And if it's something like that, that's natural and uh, can help with protein, things like that. Because people are so like they think they need chicken for protein, all these false ideas.
yeah,
Um, okay,
well,
great. I look forward to
yeah,
talking about that.
offline, just send me your mailing address, and
Okay, we'll do.
I'll get that out to you by tomorrow. So.
Sounds great.
In no time. But yeah, thanks. I'm so grateful for you, man. You provided so much insight and information, and then you even, gave me an opportunity to speak a little bit.
You want a funny song to leave with?
Of why, of course, why not?
All right. You hear it? Great.
All right. What's it going to be? A galactic fast for Christopher? An exoplanet for Otis? A nutter nebula for June Marie? And listen, NASA's got a new one today.
What is it?
This is called a scamdiddlyumptious bar.
A scamdiddlyumptious bar? How does he do it?
My dear boy, do you ask how they fly in a vacuum?
No.
Or why they Photoshop Earth?
No.
No, sirree, you don't. They do it because they have to and know what's best for you. NASA was born to be a scam man, and you look like you were born to be a scammed man. Who can take the sunrise and say it's you who truly moved? Cover up their screw-ups with a murder, maybe 2.
Or 3 or 4.
The NASA man. The NASA man can. The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good. Who can take the night sky drape it in a lie. Polish up some mirrors and say that they see back in time.
The NASA man?
The NASA man. The NASA man can. The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good. The NASA man creates pictures that are fake. The ones of Saturn seem suspicious. He puts the stars as far as he wishes and makes new words for unreal distance.
A light year!
Who can take tomorrow and come up with a scheme? Flying planes much faster than we thought with the jet stream. The NASA man.
The NASA man can!
The NASA man can. The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good. And who can make a chemtrail crisscross way up high and call it global warming when it heats up in July?
The NASA man?
The NASA man. The NASA man can. The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good. Who can talk to Nixon?
Hello, Neil and Buzz.
250,000 miles in the sky.
I'm talking to you by telephone.
2-second delay, but from the ISS it's 5.
The NASA man?
The NASA man.
What is the ISS position right now?
The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good.
11 seconds.
The NASA man creates geocentric coordinates. Stationary taste delicious. The spinning ball is pure fictitious. Astronauts are having green screen glitches. Who can take a rainbow, make it perverted, not divine? But who can be inclusive and hire that new guy, Caroline?
The NASA man?
The NASA man. The NASA man can. The NASA man can, 'cause he lies, he cheats, he scams, but for our own good. So we should believe we are spinning, 'cause the NASA man says we should.